The smell of a Mark 8 Liberty tank is the smell of a dying world trying to reinvent itself through fire and grease. It is a suffocating cocktail of unrefined petroleum, hot iron, and the metallic tang of cordite, now mixed with something new, the ozone-heavy, sickly sweet scent of living metal. My name is Captain Silas Hammer Vance, and I am the commander of the Indomitable, a 60-ton rolling fortress of American steel that has been rebuilt with the scavenged bones of the enemy. We didn't just plate our tanks with the iridescent alloy taken from the fallen tripods of the Argonne. We stitched it into the very chassis. The Indomitable doesn't just rumble. It hums with a low, alien vibration that makes the rivets glow a ghostly blue in the dark of the Texas border. We were the spearhead. The last gasp of humanity's defiance. Ahead of us, across the blinding white salt flats of the New Mexico border, stood the obelisk. It was a spire of black glass that pierced the heavens, 3 miles high, pulsing with a rhythmic violet light that orchestrated every alien walker and drone across the continent. It was the brain, the heart, and the god of the extinction. And we were going to drive a stake through it. Driver. Full throttle. Don't you dare let off that pedal until we're inside their ribs. I roared into the voice tube, my words competing with the deafening grind of the heavy treads. Aye, Captain. She's running hot, but the blue metal is holding the heat. Private Tully's voice came back, strained and echoing through the iron belly of the beast. The Indomitable lunged forward, its massive tracks biting into the salt and sand. To our left and right, 80 more iron-sided tanks emerged from the morning fog, a wall of wood and iron giants updated with the fury of the stars. It was the greatest cavalry charge in the history of the Republic. Above us, the sky was a bruised purple, choked with the smoke of a world on fire. The obelisk detected us. The ground shook as a dozen Goliath-class tripods rose from the sand like ancient, malevolent insects. They were 300 feet tall, their obsidian hulls shimmering with an oily non-Euclidean light. They didn't wait. The first heat ray lanced out, a beam of white-hot thermal energy that turned the air into a furnace. Brace for impact. The beam hit the Indomitable directly on the frontal glacis plate. Normally the steel would have melted like wax. But the alien alloy plating we had bolted on didn't melt. It absorbed. The iridescent metal turned a brilliant, blinding white, shunting the energy along the hull into the ground. Inside the tank, the temperature spiked to 140 degrees. I felt the sweat vaporize off my skin instantly, but we were still moving. Graves. Give him the long shots. Gunner Graves, a man whose soul had been forged in the artillery pits of Verdun, didn't hesitate. He pulled the lanyard of our modified 6-pounder gun. We weren't firing standard high explosives. We were firing flux shells, hollowed-out projectiles filled with the unstable blue fluid taken from the tripod's own power cores. Tum. The recoil rocked the 60-ton tank back on its treads. The shell streaked across the flats, a trail of blue static following it through the air. It hit the lead tripod in its central knee joint. There was no orange fire. There was only a soundless, terrifying expansion of blue energy that simply erased the matter in the joint. The tripod's leg vanished, and the gargantuan machine tilted, its weight crushing a dozen smaller alien drones as it crashed into the salt with a sound like a mountain collapsing. One down. Keep the line. Steady as she goes. But the drones were swarming now. Thousands of scuttlers, brass and glass crabs the size of dogs, poured out of the dunes. They clambered onto the hulls of the tanks, their serrated mandibles searching for the vision slits and the radiator vents. I saw the tank to our left, the Liberty Bell, disappear under a wave of the metallic vermin. Its guns fired frantically until a scuttler jammed a sonic grenade into its exhaust. The tank exploded in a spray of blue sparks and scorched rivets. Tully. Zigzag. Shake him off. I grabbed my M1918 bar and stood up in the command hatch, exposing my head and shoulders to the chaos. The wind was a howling gale of sand and ozone. I saw a scuttler leaping toward my face, its glass eyes spinning. I leveled the bar and emptied a 20-round magazine into its torso. The .30-06 rounds tore through the brass shell, the creature shattering into a cloud of gears and sapphire oil. The obelisk. We're at the threshold. We were within 1,000 yards of the spire. The air here was distorted, the light bending around the base of the black glass tower. The gravity began to shift. The Indomitable felt light, the treads barely touching the ground as the spire's internal magnetic field tried to repel our iron hull. Tully. Give it the nitro. Blow the valves if you have to. A roar of blue fire erupted from our rear exhausts. We were no longer a tank. We were a meteor. We hit the base of the obelisk at 40 miles per hour. The black glass didn't shatter. It ripples like water, absorbing the Indomitable into its structure. Suddenly, the noise of the battlefield vanished. We were inside a cathedral of light and geometry. The walls were made of liquid obsidian, and the air was filled with glowing violet filaments that pulsed like the veins of a living god. In the center of the hall sat the core, a rotating sphere of white fire that was the source of the signal. Everyone out. We set the charges and we run for the hatch. We scrambled out of the tank, our boots clattering on the glass floor. Graves and Tully carried the sun bomb, a massive crate filled with every scrap of alien fuel we had left in the Western Department. We weren't just blowing the tower, we were going to trigger a chain reaction that would reach every tripod in the hemisphere. But the Guardians were waiting. They were tall, translucent silhouettes of light, armed with blades of concentrated plasma. They didn't have faces, only a single glowing red line where a mouth should be. Graves, set the timer. Tully, cover the left. I've got the front. I raised the bar, my hands shaking with a mix of heatstroke and adrenaline. The first Guardian lunged, its plasma blade slicing through the air with a sound like a lightning strike. I fired. The heavy rounds slowed the entity, but it didn't stop. I dropped the bar, pulled my trench knife and dived into the thing's midsection. It felt like fighting a ghost made of high-voltage wire. The electricity surged through my body, making my vision go white, but I drove the steel into the glowing red line of its face. The Guardian shattered into 1,000 sparks. Timer set. 30 seconds. Graves yelled, his face bleeding from a dozen glass cuts. We sprinted back toward the Indomitable. The spire was beginning to shriek, the walls turning from black to a terrifying, glowing orange. The core was collapsing. We climbed into the tank, Tully slamming the engine into reverse. Go. 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 We burst out of the obelisk's side just as the white fire reached the outer shell. The explosion wasn't a sound, it was a wave of pure silence that flattened the desert for 10 miles. I looked back through the vision slit. The obelisk didn't fall, it evaporated. A pillar of white light shot 10 miles into the atmosphere, severing the clouds and turning the morning into a second, brighter day. The shockwave hit us. The 60-ton tank was tossed like a toy, rolling 3 times across the salt flats before landing upright in a massive crater. Silence followed. A silence so profound it felt like the world had been muted. I pushed the hatch open, the metal groaning as it swung on its ruined hinges. I climbed out and stood on the scorched roof of the Indomitable. All across the flats, the tripods were falling. Their iridescent hulls were gray and lifeless, their heat rays extinguished forever. The living metal had died with the spire. The drones were inert husks in the sand, their red lights dark. The star-spangled extinction was over. I looked at my hands. They were covered in oil, salt, and the blue ichor of the gods. I looked at the horizon. The purple clouds were breaking, revealing the pale, honest blue of the Texas sky. For the first time in years, the air didn't taste like ozone. It tasted like rain and dust and the promise of a long, quiet sleep. I sat on the edge of the tank and pulled a tattered American flag from my tunic. I didn't wave it. I didn't cheer. I just laid it across the scorched armor of the Indomitable. Tully and Graves climbed out beside me, their faces blackened, their eyes wide with the realization that they would actually see tomorrow. The desert wind began to howl, but it was just wind. No whispers, no signals, no humming. Just the sound of the earth reclaiming its own. We had fought the stars with the iron of the earth, and the iron had held. The fire is out. The gears are still. The salt is white. The sun climbs higher over the silent giants of the border, casting long shadows of rust and glass. We are the survivors of a war that has no medals, only scars and the memory of the light. The tanks sit in the sand, monuments to a defiance that reached the heavens and pulled the stars down into the mud. We walk away from the metal, our footsteps heavy, our hearts finally light, as the world begins to breathe again in the silence of the dawn. The iron stays cold. The desert stays vast. The sky is ours.